Well, of course, that was one of the happiest days of my life. That was the day in which we all congregated officially as the U.S. First Astronaut Group. We had been through a selection process, obviously, previous to that time, but that was the day we first showed up officially as the first astronauts of the United States back at Langley Field, Virginia. Well, of course, NACA had become NASA in a great big hurried turnaround, as you recall. And the program of astronaut selection and training basically was run by the people who worked from Langley. Originally, of course, we all reported into Washington. That was where the initiation, the introduction, the pre-selection, all that sort of routine went on, and then, as you know, we had physicals elsewhere in the country. But once the selection was made, of course, we reported to those people at Langley Field, which was kind of neat for me because I was already stationed in Norfolk in a job which I didn't like in the first place. I was finally taken out of airplanes and put behind a desk for the first time in a bunch of years. But so it was a real easy trip for us. We just didn't even have to move. Well, I think that it was an immediate realization that we had essentially a new product. It didn't look very much like an airplane, but if you were going to put a pilot in, it was going to have to fly somehow like an airplane. And that when you have a brand strange new machine, then you go to the test pilots. That's what they were trained to do, and that's what they had been doing. Now, of course, NACA had some test pilots, but they were a little bit older. None of them, I don't think, were in a position where they probably could have competed with the varied background of test flying, which most of us had. And so the decision was made. And I don't know, they say that Eisenhower had something to do with the decision because he said, well, yeah, we need a test pilot. He agreed with that. NACA, NASA now didn't have very many test pilots, so let's go to the military and see what they have to offer. Now, whether Eisenhower himself was involved in the decision, apparently the White House was to some degree. Several of them had been involved in the preliminary selection process, so I was generally familiar with their background. Glenn, of course, I had known before. Schirra I had known before because of our Navy connections. So I knew there was a lot of talent there, and I knew that it was going to be a tough fight to win the prize. Well, it was an interesting situation because, as I say, I was friendly with several of them. And on the other hand, realizing that I was now competing with these guys, so there was always a sense of caution, I suppose, particularly talking about technical things. Now, in the bar, of course, everything changed, but in talking about technical things, there was always a sense of maybe a little bit of reservation, not being totally frank with each other, because there was this very strong sense of competition. Well, you know, it was an interesting situation getting together with the 7 originals for the first time. And of course, having known some of them before with the Navy connections, but yet all of a sudden realizing that here was competition. There were 7 guys competing for the first job, or whatever that turned out to be. 7 guys going for that one job. So on the one hand, there was a sense of friendliness and maybe in some support, but on the other hand, hey, I hope the rest of you guys are happy because I'm going to make the first flight.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we are introducing to you and to the world these 7 men who have been selected to begin training for orbital space flight. These men the nation's Project Mercury astronauts are here after a long and perhaps unprecedented series of evaluations which told our medical consultants and scientists of their superb adaptability to their coming flight. Which of these men will be first to orbit the Earth, I cannot tell you. He won't know himself until the day of the flight. The astronaut training program will last probably 2 years. During this time, our urgent goal is to subject these gentlemen to every stress, each unusual environment they will experience in that flight. Before the first flight, we will have developed our Mercury spaceship to the point where it will be as reliable as man can devise. We expect it to be as reliable as any experimental aircraft. It's my pleasure to introduce to you, and I consider it a very real honor, gentlemen. From your right, Malcolm S. Carpenter, Leroy G. Cooper, John H. Glenn, Virgil I. Grissom, Walter M. Shira, Alan B. Shepard, Donald K. Slayton. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the nation's Mercury astronauts.
There will be other opportunities for picture taking later in the afternoon. Now, if we can move on, I'd like to introduce 5 gentlemen who have had a very important part in the selection process and in the planning to date. I introduce them not in the order they will be speaking to you, but in the way it's written down for me here. Dr. Randolph Lovelace, Chairman of the NASA Life Sciences Committee. Dr. Lovelace. Brigadier General Donald Flickinger of the Air Force and Captain Norman Barr of the Navy. They have had the responsibility for selection primarily in the aeromedical field. Also, Robert R. Gilruth, Director of Project Mercury and of the Space Task Group that is working on this project, Bob Gilruth. And Charlie Donlin, his assistant. Now I'd like to call upon Bob Gilruth to say a few words.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here on this occasion. I'm sure you're all familiar with the objectives of Project Mercury. I don't intend to make any speech whatsoever about it, as I know you're all here primarily to meet our astronauts. Thank you very much.
And now I'd like to call on Dr. Lovelace, who will tell you a little bit about the physical examinations which were given these young men. Dr. Lovelace.
I just hope they never give me a physical exam, because it's been sort of a rough, long period that they've been through. I can tell you that if you pick highly intelligent, highly motivated and intelligent men, and I can say that every one of them is that type of a person, that our job as physicians is a relatively easy one. They are, as you know, family men, and I'm not worried about their stability, their powers of observation, or their powers to accomplish the task which they're given. I can tell you that I'm very, very thrilled that we had a part in the program, and I'm darn glad to know them.
Project Mercury involved more than one man, and the answer is we don't know yet, but for sure the second or third or fourth step will involve more than one man.
I have a question about physical requirements. Is the most important thing the stamina to withstand an immediate shock, or the endurance to withstand a long, grueling strain?
The question is about physical requirements? Is it stamina to endure a long, grueling strain, or is it stamina to endure a shock? And Captain Barr, General Flickinger, and Dr. Lovelace, you can flip coins on that one.
Well, I feel that the problem will be one of multiple stresses, and I think Captain Barr and General Flickinger feel the same way. And the way the program is set up, I feel that every man here can withstand the stresses to which they will be subjected. I forgot one thing when you asked if we were going to follow along in the program. There will be a major Bill Douglas, a flight surgeon, as I understand, that will be with the men all the time. And there have already been some fellows down at Langley Field with them that have participated in the program to a very large extent.
I don't know what that means. Does that mean by stresses you mean long time endurance or a momentary shock?
Well, I'll try to be as specific as I can with you, and willing to get into specifics if you want to take the time. Really, if I can give you this picture, we start out with as you already know, with the extremely detailed clinical examination, perhaps the most exhaustive that has ever been devised. Then we go from that to, as I say, this battery of what we call simulated space stresses. This is the full spectrum of them. Isolation, confinement, the dynamic forces as a part of the vehicular expenditure of any energy to get into orbit, and the destruction of that energy to get back into land. Now, it just so turns out that when you pick people with, you might say, a superior foundation physically, with a good, mature psychological approach to hazardous and new types of experiences, that by and large you will find that for any individual stress, whether it be an impact force of 50 Gs for a short period of time, or a prolonged exposure of, say, 6 to 8 to 10 Gs for the reentry pattern, that by and large this individual will react favorably to all of these stresses, both individually and combined. And this is what these candidates proved in the stress tests. Does that answer your question?
I'd like to ask Dr. Fleckinger if
Thank you.
if the scientists, if the doctors find any particular pep pills or injections or anything they can give them before they go up to take them on, sustain them in combat this fatigue.
The question is, will pep pills or other means be used to keep these boys at maximum alertness throughout their orbital flight? And the question was addressed to General Flickinger.
Specifically, no, we won't resort to any pep pills. They certainly will be trained on all of what you might say ordinary medical emergencies that might occur to them, either as a result of vehicular failure, component failure, or some intercurrent acute happening to themselves. But we have definitely proven in the work that we've done on ground simulators that for the duration of the mission that they're expected to perform, we will have no need to have artificial stimulation. They have their own built-in governing factor, which is quite adequate.
Henry?
Paul, you've been talking about orbital flight. Do you have any idea of when you might be ready to begin manned flights and ballistic missiles over less than orbital range?
The question is that we've been talking about orbital flight. How soon, earlier than that, will we be shooting them in their capsules over ballistic trajectories? Before we answer that, might I urge you gentlemen to after the answer to this question, insofar as possible, to stick to the questions about the men themselves, because they have other things to do later in the day, and while they want to be thoroughly responsive, they don't want to stay here all afternoon. Bob, would you like to answer that?
Walter Bonney's already quoted Glennon as saying this might come off, the orbital phase might come off sometime after 2 years. The suborbital flights are a prelude to the orbital ones. We're going to get them as soon as we can. However, as I said earlier, we have all these systems to translate into hardware and to check out. So any kind of an exact estimate can't be given, except they'll definitely come before the orbital flights.
John Finney?
Walter, we've heard a lot about these men's physical capability. I wonder if Dr. Flickinger, or Captain Barr, and Dr. Lovelace could give us any idea what kind of IQs do they have?
The question is, we know they're physically darn near perfect. What about their IQs? Which one of you gentlemen? Don?
That's easy, Walt. I can tell you this, that every one of the gentlemen have IQs about 10% higher than any of us.
I could say a lot higher than 10%, but...
We're very dumb anyway.
Well, me too, so we have a lot in common. But they're all above normal.
All above normal.
Yes.
Can you give any number, bracket, range?
Come on.
120.
All above 120.
They all over 130.
I would say yes. Which is way high. 100 percentile.
Let's get a lady question now.
Would the gentleman mind telling us which one of the tests in your team felt the hardest?
The question is, would the gentleman like to say which test they liked least? I'm in on a secret, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll say the next but one, because they're all agreeing on one. Johnny Glenn, you answer, and then we'll start this way and around that way.
That's a real tough one, because we had some pretty good tests, but I think the tests out at Dr. Lovelace's place at Albuquerque out there, certainly some of the tests we had out there were the most trying. And it's rather difficult to pick one, because if you figure how many openings there are on the human body and how far you can go in any one of them.
You gave it away.
Now you answer which one would be the toughest for you.
I think he's answered for all of us.
That was the toughest one for me.
Well, I think it would be very difficult to pick any one. I think he answered it very well there.
They're all of many different types. I believe that the ones that involved extended effort, like the treadmill and the bicycle, are certainly the most fatiguing.
Well, I'll switch directions from John. The one I had the most difficulty with was swallowing that rubber tube for the stomach, whatever they're doing down there. Swallowing a rubber tube for gastric analysis, I believe it is.
Well, I think John Glenn answered the question pretty well. To perhaps carry it a little bit further, the tests at the Lovelace Clinic and also those in Dayton actually complemented each other. And almost every test they devised was strenuous in one way or another. Although at that particular time, of course, they were administered separately.
I have nothing to add to the test. I think the stresses are part of it, but John Glenn's covered it too well for me to add to it.
Well, it's been covered quite well, but to me, I think this is the worst here.
Well, could we have the present home addresses of these men?
Could we get the present home addresses of the gentlemen. We start with Carpenter, please.
11911 Timmy Lane in Garden Grove, California. 11911 Timmy Lane, Garden Grove, California.
I think all these addresses are in those folders.
I think if you read them carefully, you'll find them all, but let's go through to make sure.
Well, we're in the process of moving right now. My address has been at Edwards Air Force Base, but shortly after this, it will be down at Langley.
We're pretty new to this, to our dealings with the people in this program so far, naturally, but from what we have seen and what we know of the people so far, we have a lot of faith in them. As far as religious affiliations go, I'm a Presbyterian, Protestant Presbyterian, and take my religion very seriously, as a matter of fact. I've taught Sunday school in the Presbyterian Church, and I was on the Board of Trustees at the last duty station and a few things like that. And as far as we're very active in church work and kids in Sunday school and all the things connected with the church work. My own feelings as far as religious background on this are, it's very easy, I think, and you'll find a lot of pilots who like to take it, what I consider to be sort of a crutch, and look at this thing completely from a fatalistic standpoint of sometime I'm going to die, and so I can do anything I want in the meantime, and it doesn't make any difference because when my time comes, I'm going anyway. Well, this is not what I believe. I was brought up believing that you're placed on earth here more or less with sort of a 50-50 proposition, and this is what I still believe. We're placed here with certain talents and capabilities. It's up to each one of us to use those talents and capabilities as best he can. And if you do that, the opportunities will be, I think there's a power greater than any of us that will place the opportunities in our way, and if we use our talents properly, we'll be living the kind of life we should live. This is the way I look at this whole program. I look at it, if I use the talents and capabilities I happen to have been given to the best of my ability, I think there is a power greater than I am that will certainly see that I'm taken care of if I do my part of the bargain.
Oh, I consider myself religious. I'm a Protestant, belong to the Church of Christ, and I'm not real active in the church as Mr. Glenn is, but I consider myself a good Christian still, and I usually hold Sunday school. Glenn said, I have faith in the people I'm working with, the people that are working on the capsule.
I have followed the Episcopal Church as my faith. I'm not an active participant in church activities. I think I should like to dwell more on the faith in what we've called the machine age. We've got to face the space age. The remarks the other fellows have made about the best minds in the country involved in this project obviously has to apply. All of us have had faith in mechanical objects. We've been driving cars, some not successfully. We've been flying airplanes, some not successfully. I think the space program also will have some problems in it, but again, you have to believe that we are trying to do something and we're going to do it as well as we can.
To answer your question about faith, I don't mean to slight the religious angle in my answer. I, of course, am a Christian and attend church. I think pertinent here is the entire philosophy on Project Mercury, as expressed by Dr. Glenn in the latter part of January, I believe, and possibly to rephrase his words a little. This project is not in direct technical competition with any other agency as we know it. The project, as described to you people and to us, is merely one step in the evolution of space travel. Along those lines, I would like to say that I think it's also pertinent to state that the risk, as you put it, is not as great as you possibly feel that it is. The program is designed as a step in the evolution of space travel, and as such, I'm sure the men connected with this project will not attempt space flight until we have reached the probability which has been set. The probability which has been set is higher. In other words, we have a better chance of coming back than we have, many of us here and our contemporaries have had, on routine test flights which we've made for the service. I would like to discount the fact that this project is extremely hazardous, and also to reiterate what Dr. Glennon has said, that it's not a technical race, it's a step in the evolution of space travel.
As far as my religious faith is concerned, I'm a Lutheran, and I wouldn't say I was overly religious. I go to church periodically. I'm like most of the other people, however, I don't feel that any particular extra faith is called for in this program over what we normally have. I've been flying in the Air Force for 17 years, and many people think that flying is somewhat hazardous. I don't. I've been test flying for the last 4 years, and many people think this is extra hazardous, and I don't think it's especially so. And to me, this is just a normal extension of flight. I see nothing about it that's any more hazardous than what I've been doing for the last 4 years especially.
Next question, Nat.
Tell us what his church affiliation is.
Mr. Shepherd, your church affiliation, sir, if you care to say.
Yes, I'm not a member of any church. I attend the Christian Science Church regularly.
In the event one of these gentlemen is eliminated from the program for any reason during the period
the question is, in the event that for any reason one of these gentlemen becomes eliminated from the program, will he be replaced? Bob? Not necessarily, and as I understand it, we don't think that it will be necessary.
So have you got more work to do at Wright Patterson? This group will all be aligned.
The question is, do we have more work to do at Wright Patterson, or will all the work be done at Langley? If I might give the answer to that one, yes, indeed, we will be going back to Wright Patterson. We will be going to Johnsville, PA, where the Navy has a centrifuge. We may be going to a number of other service installations or medical facilities around the country. This is, in truth and in every possible way of saying it, a national program in which every resource of the nation in the areas required is being called upon. Yes, sir.
Well, all their wives are going along with now, they say. They recall their wives' first reactions when they said they were going to volunteer.
The question is, or the observation, take your choice, while the wives of these 7 men at the present time are all giving them support to the project, what about as the thing gets closer to the first orbital flight?
No,
and would the gentlemen like to recall, if they can, their wives' first reaction to a hazardous undertaking?
They decided they wanted to volunteer.
When they decided they wanted to volunteer for this project. Let's start in the middle with Brother Grissom. He looks fat and happy at this point. Let him start.
Well, there was never any question in my mind about volunteering. It was just, could I get in on the program? When I said something to my wife, what she thought about my volunteering, she says, well, do you even have to ask? That's all I want to.
Well, to go way back when the first information of this program came out, when every one of us, you as well as us sitting right here, were ignorant about the whole thing, I can recall my own reaction, what a bunch of idiots. And my wife felt the same way. Now, this takes a little education. I had to be educated too. I think that's what we're trying to do to you today, is to educate you to the fact that we're not playing games. This is serious business. And you can't just face up to this thing and say, we're going to, as Mr. Donlan said, put $1 million in a can and fire it into space. It's nothing like that at all. You don't make a program out of something as crude as that. This is a professional program. We're trying to do something with it. And most people who have asked me, why are you in this idiotic program, I immediately say, if you'll take a little bit of time to think about it, to study it, you realize that this is something that we're very serious about.
In answer to the question about my wife's original reaction, I believe I indicated earlier she was in complete support of my professional decision. She is now and has been at all times.
Personally, my wife isn't too concerned about what I do professionally. I think she's more concerned about whether she can find a babysitter and whether there's a commissary nearby to buy groceries and this sort of thing. And whether I'm in this program or running a filling station wouldn't concern her too much, as long as we had everything else we needed.
Malcolm?
My wife's enthusiasm has matched mine throughout the program. As a matter of fact, when I was notified that I was to be considered during the second and third phases of the competitive program, I was at sea at this time, and so my wife called Washington and volunteered for me.
Good show. Said I was at sea at the time, so my wife called Washington, volunteered for me.
What can I say after that one?